Hey, and welcome to this video where we'll talk a little about how this SuccessFactors integration have been developed that would actually look at employees starting into the future and what you can actually see from those. So we have a couple of components in this, and each of these have been created as separate flows. So the first one, we have an API query, and this allows users just to use a normal client, Postman or something like that would just send an XML request that says which users you want to get information about, and then you can specify where do you want to send this information. And the other one is a scheduled job that run every night to query all users that have been changed since it ran last time, plus that are starting for today. Here we have the query that is actually creating these data, and then each of these two flows have then access to send data into either Salesforce or whatever systems that you want to connect. But obviously this all depends on you, and this has been built as like an example on what you need to create, how you can get things to work, but you would obviously need to tailor this because there's a lot of difference in how you're using data, and I can see with this implementation there has been some difference between our production and our development tenants, as well as a whole host of other data that has been, for some users it's been placed in one area, whereas in others it's been placed in a little different way. So there are some business logic that's specific to that customer. I've chosen to keep it just to give you an idea on what you can actually do, but you would obviously need to implement this yourself. So there are two quirks that you need to know about. One is this thing about effective date, and there's in the document there's a description where you can find this, but this states that when you are actually querying, we have an imp job object, and under each of these objects you can actually drill down and find more data about the specific user. In this case we're actually adding the data, or we're searching for imp job, and under imp job we have a user, and if the user is starting in a month, we actually don't have that information about the user starting in a month because it's the data is not there and we would not see it. So you would need to specify for these elements that we are not able to get, you actually need to go into a specific query, ask for the user information for this date instead of just, and then it would actually be able to expand it. So you need to use the from date at that specific point in time. The other thing we found was that users are not active, or users starting in the future is not active, so you would actually not be able to query them. And I guess it's a little difficult to see right here, but you need to query that the user status is either active or inactive. I'm just in my filter, I'm just saying that it should be different than X, so I know it will actually, but it needs to query these things. And I think there is some action you actually need to specify for the user for having access to these things. But these two things you need to keep in mind for this to work. So that was all I wanted to share with you, and then let me go to the flow. So here we have the package. There's a documentation here that will cover some of the more detailed descriptions of the document of what's going on. So let's start with just the API. And in this we have so the API here, this is the one we're actually calling from external side. Here we are just extracting which system, with, for instance here Salesforce, we want to query, and then we are actually just calling the query with this payload that we already have. We will save the data, number of counts set as XML, and then if this has been set as XML, we would send it to the Salesforce process. We want to restore our response, and then we want to send this back to the user without any modification in. So this is a pretty simple flow. Then the other thing we have is, so let's just take the Salesforce. That's a pretty simple flow. So here we're just creating an XSLT mapping that will take our input structure, move it down to a CSV file. I found that that was the easiest to use for uploading data in this part, and we need to set some headers. And in this one we have used Process Direct, and we have created a Salesforce batch, and I think I will also be sharing that one on the site so you can actually see how we're doing this. Otherwise you may be able to use the Advanco OEM Salesforce adapter. We did find that it was not able to support batch version 2, where there are some links are not visible in this one, and there was also a different authentication that we wanted to have. But yeah, this is just showing how you can actually send it to a specific system. Then our scheduling process works the following way, that you would actually, so you have a timer here that runs every day. We will fetch information from the last run date, so we know that this was processed run yesterday at this point in time. We will create just a simple Groovy script that will get tomorrow's date, get date +1, and then format it as a number and set that in as a property. And then we say have here, if we did not find this data, we need to set the new date, and we'll just use this format, which is last modified on, was I guess this morning. Once we get this, we can create this XML that contains the query. So here we have last modified, we have a start day for this information. We will just save this, so we got it at a later stage. So once we have called the SuccessFactor query, we would send it in an email to a specific user that you want to specify, and we would also send it on the Process Direct to the Salesforce adapter. And once, so it will do the query, it will count number of entries, so we can send that into the email. It will then do this multicast branch that will take the Salesforce first, and then it will take the email, so we know that if we get the email, it has been delivered to our Salesforce. And then after this, we will then go into our branch number 2, which is the write variables. And in this one, we actually save the variables from the last run at. And I think we're actually creating this one already up here, because we want to know, even before we get started, yeah, if we start the query, there may be a user that's actually being changed while we're running this, and we don't want that we want those users to be replicated next time. So there may be an overlap about these things, but I guess that would be okay to send a user an extra time if it was modified during that minute or two that the querying did take place. Then obviously we have the big one, and this is the querying part, that is then using the employee that was changed query. So let's have a look at this one. And I think this actually shows a good about how you can actually modularize your code, putting it to different flows, making it easier to run it there. So here we have our changed employees. And the way it works is it will go through the document here. It will find if you have specified a single user ID. I think it will get the date, as of date, I'm not sure we're using that one. Some are here there for legacy reasons. Then we have the query date, and here we're creating a filter that says if date is equal to this, or employee nav. So we are asking for the different components in this. Or we actually can also just create a user for our users. So we can have multiple different users in our document. And with this, we're actually just passing the list of users and creating a filter that says with this slurper, for each of the item in our user list, we would create a user equals or user equals or user equals. So we would actually be able to query multiple users at once, multiple named users at once. Do you want to continue? Yes. Then we would do our query, and here we would do our processing, and obviously I haven't connected this to a Salesforce system, or do not have a SuccessFactors system here, so it sometimes can be a little difficult seeing what data here we have. The best way to modify this is to use some kind of a notebook that can actually handle these data, and we can see we got user ID, we got manager ID, and then later we will do so here we have our filter, we have our date, from date, and I think there's also a part here that says expand. So we have expand, so expand event now, manager now, user now, and that means that it will actually show the manager nav that we're actually getting here, the user nav, employee nav, and stuff like that. So with this, we have specified some of these user criteria that we want to make, and obviously you want to adjust this so it matches the data that you actually want to see in your landscape. So that's the query part, and we're using the Successfactors adapter. We're using a get, employee, page size, timeout in minutes. We have seen sometimes that the times out and doesn't really work, or some of the other ones later will do that. As we said earlier, sometimes you'd see that the user nav has not been filled in because the users is first starting in a couple of days. And to do that, we would then split the document for each imp job in it. We will process it in streaming, so it will just create some chunks of this data. We will save the user ID, the original payload that's coming in this part, and if it has this extra information, then we're calling this get missing data, and I think that's probably the key part of this. And here we'll go through a lot of things about saving the data. This one will, so in this XSLT we will actually see which processes do we need to run, and we want to run the standard. If the last name is missing in the user nav, we need to create the per user, we need to create the per personnel, and the manager. So I think this is personal information like name, address, phone numbers and stuff like that is based in this one. User information, yeah, something else. Then we would split for each of these items that we just created in our root element. We will get our item value just so I know what it is. I had some trouble getting this running, but this helps me here, so we can see that it will default go through this one. Just insert the main payload. When it gets the person, it will do a query. So we are setting in the query in this resource path. What are the local user it should use, and then we're calling the connection data. Actually, yeah. So I think may not be using all of these query information. So it's just creating the query here. This is the information that we need from per personnel. This is the information we need from the user, and here we can see this filter that we have added, that the user should be different than X or not X. just to ensure we're getting both active and inactive users here. And then once all of these has been done, it will go into this gather process that will then combine them all into one document, and they will all have separate information. And then we just want to do a join, and here I'm using an XSLT that will go through each employee, and then it will find the different managers that we have, no matter how well it is specified. So it is possible that you can have multiple managers, or you can have, so if a manager has multiple items, which means that it has been changed multiple times for a specific period of time, you would see that there would be multiple managers and multiple users. And that is why we want to have this this part, getting the message one from the users, to join all of these things together, and then we don't want to get all these other ones. So if there's more than 9, it probably will give some problems, but I think we haven't seen that yet. So then we have actually full data for one person. Next up is, so that's this one. We'll gather all of these documents. We will save our payload in a simple Groovy script here that just save the process as query data. So I've created a generic method here that just takes the name and the payload, the message and the payload name, and then runs this put it in as an attachment to it. Then we are making an XSL to generate a generic format, and in this one we will go over each employee job. We will save the user email. We will create an employee. So this is our output document that will go through. We will get the status from these two, if it's true or false, if the user is active, and that's apparently some list that can change. We will get the username also as a variable. So the way I'm doing this is getting this variable for username, and then I'm using it in here because sometimes the username can be a little different, and you can have some little different data. Our cost center is not the full cost center, but without the last 4 digit of the cost center. Some user email that it could be a number, then we should take the email address or something like that. Take it from some other location. So obviously you probably want to change this depending on how you're working with the data. So I think here, if you have the display name, so our temporary workers have name in the first and last name, whereas employees have in preferred last and second last name. We have some custom string in the title, last name, and I think it's pretty interesting that these data is spread all over this. But obviously you need to figure out what are the data that your partner systems need, and then you want to go through all of these elements. We have the phone number, so here I'm creating a variable for phone number where this phone number is one of these, and then I'm getting all of these extension values for it. Then I want to sort it, so we are doing a sorting of all of these employees based on these information with this XSLT, and that means that if a user there's different reasons why so users you can have multiple users, but you just want to create the last changed one. If a user is being expeditized or sent to a different country, they may be created as a different user with a different information, and that's why we want to have the username, the end dates, and stuff like that into it. Then I've created a message mapping because there were some things that were a little easier to do in here, when I was working on it initially, but obviously you can figure out if you want to do that. So most of this is just a one-to-one mapping. I think I have some logic about the user. If there was an old in the username, we didn't want these employees, so they were skipped from the processing. And because the data was so spread, it was easier to put it in afterwards instead of in the normal process. Then we have a filter here for bad usernames. So it will go through each user, each employee, take the username, group, ID, and check if it's okay with this functionality up here. And we'll return some error code, and if it's an error, we'll attach the error code, and we will set, if there are any errors, we'll set it as a information, or set these are the users with errors, and the user can then do something about these things, and we're setting it to log. So if you have a logging tool like the Figure application, then you can actually see, search for all that has log, and then you can actually see this information into it. Then we just want to save all our queries again and our results, so we actually can see what's coming out of this information. So this is what I wanted to share with you in this video, giving you an idea about what we actually have in and how you can create a SuccessFactors interface. And obviously you need to change this one, because this is what we had for the specific project, and you would need to create your own. But at least this gives you an idea about how you can actually get started, expand the missing data and stuff like that. So I really hope that this has been useful. You can download this as whatever mtar file, and then on your own system you just go into the import, select this, and then you can actually upload this and get started. Change it, make all the modification, copy it to your own settings and stuff like that. And there are some of these that have configuration parameters that you need to change, obviously. So you need to specify the API you want to use, or the username you want to use and stuff like that for these things. Yeah, I hope this has been helpful and you can see how it works. Thank you.